What is denied by many people, but it is actually real? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Just how much adult beverage is so many people's personality addiction, but they say it's just a social thing. Story 2. UFOs accept they are rent alien spacecraft, just an unidentified flying object, which could be anything. Story 3. That adult content is seriously having an impact on the minds of children, teenagers, young people. And abnormal views on relationships, intimacy, and conduct are being skewed in millions of impressionable brains. Story 4. Animal harmful behavior in animal agriculture. It's pretty much a requirement for an animal farm to be competitive. The milk, eggs, meat, leather, wool, etc. that you buy is guaranteed to come from an animal that was harmful behavior. Good news is that not only is none of that required to lead a fulfilling life, omission of these products from your life is also better for your health and the environment. Story 5. You could have an undiagnosed health issue anytime, anywhere at any age. That's why it's somewhat important to get checked up on by a doctor every now and then. Story 6. 90% of actual growth in mental illness comes directly from the incredibly difficult economic conditions, including the work hours needed to earn enough to just survive, inability for minimum wage to be able to afford housing, and lack of sleep. Yes, it's only relatively recently been acknowledged as serious, but that's also largely due to the regularity and severity of poor living conditions compared to even 50 years ago. Story 7. The other side of this political spectrum is as intelligent as your side, usually a talking point of the left, where I reside, and people love to throw out education and IQ stats and such. But when it comes down to it, both sides are just as swayed by propaganda and emotional appeals as the other. Y'all are just as dumb on both sides and have no self-awareness. It's important to recognize your morals don't make you immune to being incorrect. Story 8. The food provided to us in our grocery stores have lost so much nutritional value over the years, and the lack of proper foods is causing more health problems than ever before. But the Gov and Big Pharma make more money off of us if we're sick. Story 9. That clean, fresh water is a diminishing resource more precious than any fossil fuels or rare earth minerals, and private ownership of it, plus the unlimited use of it for industry, is already getting people eliminate. Answer. This, I'm a geologist, and it astounds me that people don't understand the gravity of how little clean, healthy water we have. Just because it comes out of your sink doesn't mean it's nourishing your body. People also often equate climate change to glacial melting, which is correct, but it often stops there. People don't understand how important alpine glaciers are for water sources. With rising sea and atmospheric temperatures comes more summer glacial melt, less winter glacial build, and thus significantly less fresh, clean water into the hydrologic cycle. Story 10. Trigger warnings are purely for virtue signaling. They don't help to stop people from consuming the content, and they build up the trigger warning so much that the trigger experience is far more severe than if there was no trigger warning. The only reason to put a trigger warning is to show how considerate you are. Answer. I'll go read your kink in a bit, but in case I forget, I just want to say personally I don't agree. Maybe I'll agree with the article, but your statement makes it sound like trigger warnings are useless. They stop me from seeing a lot of disturbing images and videos. Or at the very least, it stops me from accidentally watching adult content in public. Story 11. Global warming. The science is very clear, but it's still popular in right-wing circles to pretend that it's all a liberal commie plot to take away their SUVs. Story 12. Gambling is highly addictive and destroys lives. It's also become available pretty much everywhere in the United States, which will be a disaster in the coming years. Answer. Can confirm, as my stepmom does this. She recently lost her phone by leaving it on one of those charging stations. She lies to my dad about running errands, and what does it show? When he pulls up to find my iPhone, casino. For hours on end while my dad is struggling to pay the mortgage. She earns more than him, so she could definitely afford to help him pay it off sooner. But no, she opts for the casino instead. Story 13. Plant substance addiction. I'd say, I want to argue that it's as bad as hard substances or anything, but I remember growing up under the impression that plant substance is harmless. Then I started using every day and found that going a couple days without left me irritable, anxious, and physically unwell. Story 14. The severity of the world wars. People do not understand just how out of pocket they were. There is a reason we put rules to warfare for nations to abide by. Story 15. The United States is most definitely not the greatest country in the world, nor the land of opportunity. If I had the resources to be able to leave the U.S., I would in a heartbeat. Story 16. Climate change. The Civil War was, in fact, about slavery. There were no and are no good Nazis. There were no such thing as good slave owners. Story 17. Body positivity does not mean it's okay to be morbidly obese. All these obese influencers hosting body positivity conferences, area sham, FatCon. This can eliminate you in your 20s and 30s. Before everybody comes at me, I am morbidly obese, 255 ulbs, 5'11", used to weigh 280 ulbs before I started working out since October. Story 18. Climate change and what it's going to do to the planet. Still so many idiots who think it's not a problem. Story 19. Most police officers are amazing people. Nobody wants to see a video of a cop doing something good. People want to see the videos of the corrupt cops that make up the minority of officers. When a cop does something good, they're just doing their job and don't need to be recognized. Being an officer is not a glamorous job, and people refuse to acknowledge that. As the son of a respectable officer, seeing all the biased dislike is just sad. Answer. The thing is, most good officers are covering for the bad ones or get fired for trying to make things better. ACAB is because cops are refusing more oversight. ACAB is because most stories of officer misconduct end with a slap on the wrist, if that. It is a systemic issue that ensures even the good officers are still contributing to the problem, if they accept it or not. Story 20. Cultural poison brainwashing. People will actively attempt to sabotage your social standing for not fitting into your culture properly. Things like being too book smart, too feminine, too honest, too friendly, etc. Crab mentality exists for everyone of every type and color on top of the rat race of success, but people will deny it because I can't be. It's because those rules don't apply to me. Story 21. The Holocaust really happened, and Nazis started WW2. Too many people deny it, but it is a big part of recorded history. Story 22. That not all wasps are jerks. A lot of wasps are parasites and predators of disease-carrying insects and various crop pests. Then there are fig wasps, which are responsible for fig trees being able to reproduce. So overall, the world might be worse off without wasps. The yellow jackets can fudge off, though. Edit. Sorry I got auto-corrected from fig to fighting. Autocorrect is wild lol. Answer. I even made friends, more like signed a non-aggression pact, but still, with the yellow jackets who nested right by my smoking area. At first, they would fly towards me menacingly on occasion. But after a couple of years, it seems they figured out I'm no threat. They would come out of their nest in Angie mode, but then see it was me and immediately chill out. Wild experience as someone who used to completely freeze up anytime I saw a stripy bug. Story 23. The history Americans were taught in public school is completely whitewashed, and a lot of it is left out. This continues today. See Florida. Story 24. The UFO phenomenon. Not saying anyone knows what that phenomenon is for sure, but there's a phenomenon of experience dating back millennia that we now attribute to UFOs, UAPs. Story 25. That even young people get aches. My scoliosis got discovered late, about 2 years ago. I was 18. Every time I complained about back pain, people wrote it off as me being dramatic or period crumps when I wasn't even on them because apparently I was too young to have back pain. Only one doctor took my symptoms seriously and actually checked, but this was after it had already gotten worse. Thankfully, it isn't severe enough to cause panic, but it's still painful as F's key. Story 26. Anabolic steroids are more common in protein powder than most people realize. 36.7 of the samples in the study below. Story 27. ADHD. My dad thinks ADHD is a made-up condition. People fake to get attention or to put aside their bad behavior. He also thinks this about depression, anxiety, and bisexual people. Story 28. Jesus in the Bible. Too many intricacies, testimonies, and interesting facts to deny. Eternity is real for those who believe and those who don't. It's a blessing to come to know Jesus and enjoy a life walking with him. Story 29. Plant substance, while not as harmful as some other substances, has serious detrimental impacts. It shouldn't be normalized. Story 30. Sugar is poisoning us. Saying this is a sugar addict clarification, I am referring to refined sugars in the quantities that it is in our diets. Some glucose is necessary for the body to not only function well, but to survive. This glucose need is far overshot by the American diet. Answer. I was just telling a friend of mine who lives in the EU about how much I love Yoplayet's strawberry yogurt and that I bought a whole giant tub of it. He basically said, "Ooh, that shoot is too sweet." In the rabbit hole, I went and learned that most yogurt sold in America, even the seemingly bland or sour stuff, is essentially just liquid candy. 17 g of added sugar per serving is really just diabetes waiting to happen. Even our healthy food is just candy. Story 31. 65M. Developed venous incompetence at 39. Venous stasis ulcer opened up at 40. It still hasn't closed. I go for wound care at UCLA every other week. The rest of the time, I have a home health nurse change the dressing and compression wrap. That's just one issue. I never thought skin couldn't close. Story 32. That addiction isn't a choice. It's an actual brain-altering disease. Sure, that first hit of a substance is a choice, but after that, the brain is rewired. Saw it happen with my brother. It eventually eliminated him at the ripe age of 26. Story 33. That success, or lack of, has a lot to do with luck. You don't choose your strengths or flaws. You don't choose your gender, your ethnicity, or your physical appearance. You don't get to choose where or when you were born, who nurtures you, and who will influence your life growing up. The list goes on. Sort of goes with the good old free will is an illusion argument, so feel free to disagree. Story 34. Highly processed foods is making us sick. Eating more meat is actually better for you. Walking instead of running will do more for you than you think. Weight training is a healthier option than cardio. Getting sunlight exposure throughout the day will help you sleep. Lack of sleep is the root cause of many problems. Socializing with people and disconnecting from devices is very important in our well-being. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Story 35. Racism and gender discrimination. The new rise of fascism via almost the same path than past century fascisms. Story 36. Me personally, I get very frustrated when folks try to say that being obese is not unhealthy. I actually had someone on Reddit a while back try to argue with me that they have a friend who is hundreds of pounds overweight and perfectly healthy. I understand there are some folks who are the rarity and obese due to medical issues, etc., but I feel safe saying that most obese people are that way because of their eating habits. The whole embracing obese bodies thing really should not be a thing. These people are dying. They are wearing their addictions on their sleeve, and the reality is not beautiful. Need to put aside the big feelings and try to help people, even if that entails saying something they don't want to hear. Story 37. Education isn't the problem, but it is the solution. If we got politics out of education and let teachers actually teach, within a generation we would have some of the most prepared adults ever. Story 38. Mainstream media, left-right alike, are compromised and are not reliable outlets for factual information. Story 39. Long COVID is a real debilitating illness, even if you are not bedridden. I've been gaslit so many times by NHS over my symptoms and ended up having to forward articles from various medical publications and journals to my doctors as they didn't believe my symptoms were LC. One doctor actually believed me and is now helping me getting the treatment I need. Story 40. You can get addicted to pot, especially if you are using it to self-medicate mental health issues or have a history of addiction. Story 41. Evolution. A lot of people are misinformed when it comes to the topic, how it works, and the staggering amount of evidence for it. Story 42. The effects of adult content on our youth, the lives of the people willfully engaging in it, and how much it is used as a vessel to hide human trafficking in plain sight. Story 43. The Earth being round, climate change, Donald Trump losing the 2020 election fair and square, the Holocaust, etc. Story 44. A lot of great comments here recently, which is frightening and sad, is I'm reading a lot of younger generations don't believe in the Holocaust, something that did happen, yet so many young people choose it didn't. Story 45. The most common addictive substance is sugar. More people are addicted to sugar than probably anything else. Story 46. The idea that the American diet culture is super not good and is causing people with ARFID to spiral. A balanced diet of whole foods and not things prepackaged from a factory pumped full of chemicals will have a greater benefit than just restricting your diet and not eating carbs. Story 47. Food allergies and sensitivities are real. Discovered our oldest daughter had a problem with gluten. If we had pizza or pasta for dinner, would wake to the sound of her throwing up a couple hours later. Family doctor said she was not celiac, but might have a sensitivity to gluten. Stopped feeding her gluten and problem solved. For years, I have had people say going gluten-free is a fad, or if you are not celiac, you don't have a problem, etc. It has made me somewhat hostile to the food allergy gatekeepers. Did some people jump on gluten-free for non-sensitivity reasons? Sure, some people just tried it as a fad diet, and I am glad because GF products have greatly improved and become more available as a result. But there are still those who act like asking about GF products is some kind of scam. Story 48. Dying shouldn't be seen as something that's far from all of us. We can literally disappear from one day to another and there's nothing we can do about it. Story 49. Innate neurological differences in average between men and women with consequences in all areas of their psychology. Story 50. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence supporting the existence of climate change and its impact on the planet, there are still individuals and groups who deny or minimize its significance. Story 51. When people say you can't get addicted or even get withdrawals from plant substance, yes, plant substance in itself isn't addictive, but humans get addicted to plenty of things, and the withdrawals fudge suck. Story 52. ADHD, X200B, spent my child doing ADHD bingo. If you just applied yourself, there's nothing wrong with you except you're lazy. As an adult, finally got tested, have done multiple versions, my favorite of which was a full intelligence battery done by a psychiatrist. I work for a company who is very concerned with their diversity inclusion, and the corporate masking folks won't even look the wrong way at some of the more well-known groups, but have had a ton of people say ADHD isn't real. People are just lazy or making excuses. Even had someone steal several $100s worth of meds off my desk when I accidentally left them there overnight. And when I asked if anyone had seen anything, was met with, I mean, you don't really need those, right? Everyone has trouble focusing. I now try to advocate for myself without being obnoxious about it. When appropriate, germane to conversation, I will mention that I have ADHD and make sure to reference it as a disability. In my head, this helps to set a tone so people don't put their foot in their mouths. We've all done it. It's not anyone's job to be educated about my issues. And I like to think that it helps educate people as well, since I perform well and am respected in my role. X200B. Either way, my experience has been that most people think it's an excuse to be lazy or weird. Story 53. Road widening is generally ineffective at reducing traffic congestion because of induced demand and latent demand. About 15 years ago, Texas spent nearly $3 billion in order to expand the Katy Freeway, I-10, making it the widest highway in the U.S. in some places. Within 4 years, commute times were greater than they were before the construction began. Story 54. Politicians, left or right, only have their best interests in mind, not yours. The Chinese and Russians are creating a divide amongst Americans through various methods, and it is working very well. Story 55. In today's world and reality, vaccines are safe, effective, and necessary to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Story 56. Social problems, racism, sexism, anti-immigration, etc., are directly tied to economics and the exacerbation of a shrinking middle class. Story 57. The richest people pay less taxes as a percent than the middle class. They use shell companies or the capital gains loophole or both. Story 58. My cat is a menace that has conned my friends and family into believing that he is a harmless ball of fur and cuddles. The only one who believes me is my partner, and that was only after my cat woke him up every 20 minutes for a straight 9 hours by gently biting his earlobes. Story 59. The fact that extraterrestrial beings have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, UFOs are their spacecraft. Story 60. That it's perfectly okay to take pics in public places. There are many Americans that for some reason buy into the myth that you need their permission or consent to record in public. It's baffling. Story 61. Your right to take pictures of anyone and anything you can see in public. You do not need anyone's permission to take a picture or film when in public. Had a big discussion in class where everyone, plus both teachers and even one former police officer, told me I was wrong. Everyone treated me as I was an idiot and laughed at me for my crazy claim. Had to call the non-emergency police number to get my point confirmed. Story 62. Mean Canadians. The U.S. gets a bad reputation for being rude to tourists, but have you ever been to Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver during the busy seasons? We bite, no joke. Story 63. The systemic and inherent evil and corruption that is political representation in government. Millionaires employed by billionaires to convince the rest of us that they're doing it all for us instead of exploiting us like livestock. Story 64. Humans are currently causing Earth's only 6th ever mass extinction event, the Holocene-Anthropocene extinction. Story 65. Invisible pain, fibromyalgia, arthritis, mental illness, depression, etc. It's actually a very long list. Story 66. This is kind of a very situational and obscure one, but living with brain damage is difficult, especially in schooling and family social life. When I received my brain injury, it hit the emotional part of my brain, so my motor skills and cognitive function and stuff like that is unaffected for the most part. It's basically destroyed most of my relationships that I had before I got it, mostly because my entire personality changed slowly after receiving it. I am affected at school, as I am easily targeted by people, though I am well liked by the more mature students, or less mature, depends. I'm also affected by the administration treating me like I'm unable to function properly and they don't really know what to do with me, so they stick me in classes with people who are extremely underskilled in basic subjects. For example, I am above average in the state and potentially the nation in writing, language, and literature, yet I am in core classes, the classes meant for people who are underskilled, where I am not challenged in the slightest, and I never learn anything that is valuable since it is so dumbed down. This annoys me as my most liked subject is boring since I can't learn anything, since everything is a review of what we have already learned before. The administration treat me like an idiot a lot of times, which has led to me completely losing my confidence and my grades taking a toll due to that. Also, this is a minor thing, but I can't really answer the questions like, how did this make you feel, since I don't really feel emotion the same way other people do. And having to explain that every time a question like that appears is kind of dumb. My family life has been affected since I can't really connect with them, since my dad died less than a year after I got my brain injury, and my mom still thinks of me as the person I was before it for the most part. There's other stuff, but that is a major part of it. Despite my inability to form connections with people, I am able to form connections with romantic partners, and I've met my boyfriend who I plan to spend the rest of my life with. I know, it's early on, but we both are attached. I'm kind of yapping here, so I'll get to the point. I am a unique case and I almost died, but I am glad it happened still, since I never would have existed if I never got it. But I am mistreated by society, since I don't have autism or anything that is more present in people behaviorally. And I believe I have a personality disorder or two, and I am so sick of school treating me like an idiot and probably going to drop out. Also, my family life is gone, and I kind of consider them leverage. I got a dilated pupil like David Bowie, so it was worth it. Story 67. That the West aren't the good guys. Everyone is in it for themselves and has extreme amounts of blood on their hands, especially superpower nations. Story 68. Shortness of life. We all live as if we are going to live forever. We like to say only a week, but we tend to forget that we have 1,000, 2,000 weeks of active and good life. Story 69. People believe that the U.S. is more violent today than 20, 30 years ago. There is definitely more mass shooting, but takedown rates are way down and kids are not getting kidnapped like people claim. The 80s and 90s were crazy compared to now, and us kids went everywhere alone. Story 70. Recycling is a sham propelled by the plastics industry. The solution is to stop using so much plastic, not say, oh, well, I'll recycle it, as the vast majority of recycled trash isn't actually recycled. The plastics industry has spent millions for Americans to have this mentality that it's okay as long as we recycle. Answer. The problem is plastic is necessary for some things, and the alternative just moves the pollution elsewhere. A lot of plastic packaging should be replaced by paper, but for drinks food, we used to use glass, which is a lot heavier and uses a lot more fuel to ship. Even my electric car causes a ton of pollution to manufacture the batteries, and the power plant is burning natural gas to charge it. Another way we're consuming a ton of carbon is with our expanded desire for different food. Talk to your boomer parents' grandparents about what the grocery store looked like when they were kids. A lot of vegetables used to be seasonal. If you could get an avocado, for instance, it was only during American-Mexican growing seasons. Now we ship them up from South America half of the year. Story 71. That carbs are not only good for you, but necessary for proper cognitive function and cellular regeneration. Story 72. Young people being disabled. It's not uncommon in the slightest. Your body deteriorates much faster than you were told it would. Story 73. This is a really recent one, losing weight from exercise. People used to drastically overestimate the amount of calories they burn from exercise, but there's been a very recent overcorrection where people suddenly have a warped idea that you can't burn a significant amount of calories through exercise. HIIT is a very efficient way to burn calories and can be done in 10 or 20 minutes, and it puts you into a state of excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, which causes you to burn more calories at rest long after the workout. Of course, it also has other cardiovascular benefits, and it's been shown to help people maintain lean body mass while they are losing weight, so it allows people to get an efficient cardio workout and skip the strength training. TLDR, if you want to lose weight, you should not be writing off cardio. High-intensity interval training is a good idea if you have no health issues that would prevent you from doing it. Story 74. The radicalization of youth these days. The amount of hatred that men have towards women and vice versa is ridiculous. Story 75. Pit bulls are fighting dogs. The whole nanny dog thing is a false narrative. Some woman of the pit bull club, way back when, came up with and people just ran with it. You'd think this is common sense, but I see way too many people defending pits anytime they're in the news for mauling children, livestock, their pet siblings that they grew up with, etc. Yes, how you raise a dog is important, but genetics will always trump training. In America, bully breeds, as in pit bulls, XL bullies, Staffordshire Terriers, commit over 60 of fatal dog attacks overall and 90 on animal-specific attacks such as livestock and other dogs. In the UK, at least half of fatal attacks between 2021 and 2023 were committed by bully breeds. That's fatal attacks only, not including bites and serious maulings. Story 76. Moon landing happened. Earth isn't flat. Vaccinations are generally risk-free and helpful. Birds are real. Hot take. Anyone trying to convince you otherwise are trying to make money off you somehow. Story 77. We have a housing shortage in most high-demand cities in the U.S. Why are young people in San Francisco and Boston finding it impossible to afford their own place? Why is the rent so darn high? It's not because landlords suddenly got greedier. They've always been maximally greedy. It's not because corporations are buying up the homes. They own less than one of the stock. It's not Airbnb. They aren't helping, but they are a tiny part of the market, and the problem predates them. It's not because we don't have enough renter protections. They're good, but don't do anything for affordability. It's not because young people aren't making enough. They're actually finally making a lot more than their parents did. It's because NIMBYs in these cities basically outlawed new housing construction a generation ago. So more and more people are fighting over a smaller and smaller pool of homes. Story 78. There has been a large increase in wealth inequality at the expense of the rest of society, and that this trend is set to continue without a sea change of public and political will. Story 79. The current food industry is poisoning us, especially affecting children. Everything has added sugars, most of the time not even sugars, just corn syrup, excessively large portions, and genetically modified fruits and vegetables. So even fruit has added sugars to the point that the animals at the zoo can no longer consume it because it has made them obese. Lots of really young children not being able to play around because of their obesity and with their teeth full of cavities or metal coverings. Really sad seeing this effect since childhood. Story 80. How much being good-looking can be a huge influence in most things in your life, way more than people think or are willing to admit. Story 81. Period pain. A large amount of women have experienced the worst of the symptoms, and many experience them monthly. Endometriosis, PCOS, etc. There are people, including doctors, who believe that they should just suffer, and others who ignore that the suffering even exists. There are the obvious examples of certain men, and also certain women who say, I have easy periods. So my daughter, student, whatever, is just being dramatic. Good for you. Wish I could say the same, but you're an arsehole. Story 82. The state of America's politics, failing infrastructure, corporate-backed oligarchy, pretty much everything the people of the world say about the CIA, election manipulation, overt and covert, the failures of our healthcare system. A significant portion of the population sees the government as a mother-father figure and blindly supports the state's rights over individual rights and all that other Orwellian shoot. People really don't want to be free. All the WW3 shoot going on with Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, Britain, Europe in general, Iran, Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, China, Taiwan. The education system being inaccessible and or extremely expensive, government's active involvement, incitement of J6 and the governor kidnapping plot incident, cyber attacks on U.S. power grid service providers, China, Russia, Iran, abortion rights being stripped from half of the population, and draconian laws governing people's bodies in horrible ways, allowing for violation babies, ectopic pregnancies, banning of contraceptives, and other man-made horrors. Economic downturn and inflation. The USD will only get weaker and worse. Billionaires building doomsday bunkers, compounds, because why wouldn't the most well-informed and wealthy people be a major predictor of massive, potentially worldwide issues? Forever chemicals in the water, microplastics found in every placenta tested, medication shortages. The DEA clamping down on medication manufacturers and doctors about the overprescription of opioid painkillers. It's not the prescriptions. It's the illegal fentanyl that's being smuggled into the country. The DEA had a relationship with a cartel that allowed this cartel to grow and control 80 of the substances brought into the U.S. in exchange for informing on other cartels. Business Insider did an article about this a few years ago. Housing unaffordability and homelessness, human trafficking, and the relationship between it and powerful people in the elite class of the U.S. and internationally. Social media and search engines manipulating those platforms to serve an agenda that's in alignment with establishment powers. The legacy media is also doing this. All in all, it's a lot. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the big ones. There's a lot of crazy fudge up shoot happening that a lot of people don't know about or know of, but choose not to look into because it's the uncomfortable reality that has been chosen for us. Story 83. That 72 of carbon emissions comes from corporations and not us, the Americans. Yet we are the ones who are forced to accommodate the planet. Story 84. Pretty privilege. A lot of people dismiss it as being the result of confidence or something along those lines, when unfortunately we're just fancy animals. Story 85. Processed meat, like bacon and jerky and sandwich slices, is a group 1A carcinogen, the same category as smoking. Story 86. The impact of COVID. People to this day are still going on about how it's just like the flu common cold. Yet I know dozens of people who are struggling with long COVID or are now permanently disabled from having COVID. Story 87. I believe depression is legitimate, but I also believe that if you don't exercise, eat nutritious food, get sunlight, get enough sleep, consume positive material, surround yourself with support, then you aren't giving yourself a fighting chance. Jim Carrey. Story 88. Racism. I grew up in Texas and have since moved and have traveled the world and have experienced racism myself, but I've had so many people tell me, especially during the time of George Floyd's takedown, that they had no idea racism existed because they never experienced it. Kind of wild. Story 89. That propaganda hasn't existed throughout time and is happening right now and is done by all sides with endless spins and lies. And yet people fall for the false tale that it was only in 1930s Germany and a blip on the radar. People literally just join a team they belong to politically and fall for it and question nothing, especially their own side. If people were aware of that, the world would be extremely different. Story 90. That there is no truck driver shortage in the U.S. We have an oversupply of capacity at the moment. Freight rates are in the toilet. But lobbyists at the American Trucking Association have been great at their jobs, pushing that narrative out to the media and country at large. Story 91. Adult beverage is poison. We get a buzz and hangover because adult beverage is poisonous to us. We'd get the same feeling drinking radiator fluid. Story 92. Body positivity is bad for middle-aged adults. Friends of my girlfriend are defenders of body positivity movement, and every dinner includes junk food. They absolutely abhor when I suggest gym may just be a solution for mental and physical health. Answer. Actual body positivity is very good for middle-aged adults. Sometimes people are made to feel like shoot for aging. That should be countered. Crow's feet and gray hair are beautiful. Your slowing metabolism just means you've lived past childhood. Eating junk food and refusing to exercise is not body positivity. Being okay with being fat and accepting that it's not a moral failing. You haven't been able to stay below a certain weight doesn't mean you have to ignore the fact your muscles will start to hurt if you don't use them. You're going to be very body negative if your body starts falling apart on you. I am saying this as someone with an eating disorder. Loving your body means taking care of it. Story 93. A lot of normalized addictions are denied and claimed not to be real. Plant substance, caffeine, adult content, etc. Answer. I've been dependent on plant substance for the last several years, but it really peaked 3 to 10 months ago to the point where I was smoking, eating edibles every night. I was in a weird feedback loop where my depression fueled my smoking habits, and my smoking habits in turn fueled my depression. Felt like I was just trudging through the day to get high at night. I was unsatisfied in my job and personal life. I got a major wake-up call in January when I got unexpectedly laid off from my job. It forced me to clean out. Haven't smoked in close to 2 months now, and this is the clearest I've felt in a long time. I'm finding that I isolate myself less and am feeling more optimistic. Still have down days, but I'm enjoying my evenings more now that I can remember them in the media I consume. Story 94. The fact that you are not in control of your life, not saying that you're just supposed to live your life as a victim of circumstance, but be humble about it. One bad phone call, one germ microorganism can completely change the entire trajectory of your life for the rest of your life. Story 95. The true age of the universe, and by extension, the Earth. Many people believe the phony 6,000-year-old Earth hooey and will argue tooth and nail about it because it aligns with their beliefs, even if it's all just hokum. Story 96. Most of the world's wealth is inherited. It's been passed down and grown through centuries and will continue to do so. Story 97. According to my 13-year-old, his intellectual superiority, the fact that all mothers are categorically wrong and all the time, and that he has definitely done his homework. Story 98. Anxiety as an actual medical condition. I have hypothyroid, and therefore I get anxiety attacks due to an imbalance in hormones, vitamins, and minerals. Lack of one thing or too much of another thing causes anxiety attacks. It's a vicious cycle. My anxiety attacks have landed me in the hospital several times, but those doctors, as well as my own doctor, dismiss any attention to my situation. Their response is the same: "Oh, you only had an anxiety attack." They offer to speak to a social worker, but I don't have any past traumas which are manifesting themselves. My anxiety is because of my hormone issue. It sucks big time having hypothyroid. Story 99. The United States' obsession with 5 a.m. work shifts is really not healthy for the majority of people. Yet it's becoming more and more common and expected because of that single-digit % increase in money they make doing shifts like that. Story 100. Religions are not all the same, and some have a much bigger problem with extremism and human rights violations than others. Story 101. Green stuff is not panacea for all illness. It is not a 100 safe substances that you should be able to use no matter what, driving, flying, performing surgery, etc. And it never will be. Story 102. Teachers bullying and harmful behavior disable kids, especially when they're autistic. A lot of people I talk to don't seem to believe me when I say my first bully was a teacher. Story 103. 40 of Americans are essentially fascist, racist, white Christian nationalists, in part or in whole. Story 104. Government corruption is equally participated in by both Republicans and Democrats, and neither party gives a shoot about you. Story 105. Y2K, a lot of engineers, programmers, and IT specialists worked very hard to make that not be a problem. Some have called it one of the finest, if not the finest examples of international coordination ever seen by our species. They did the job so well that everyone believes there wasn't even a job to do. Story 106. That most doctors barely spend enough time with their patients to form a bond to be able to properly provide care. Story 107. Vaccines work. COVID is not inevitable and it is bad. Trump committed insurrection. He's a traitor, as well as a rapist and a fraudster, and possibly worse things. Story 108. Man-made climate change 30 years from now is going to be like, oh, guess we should have done something. Story 109. People get committed and detained against their will all the time. I work for the state and review and investigate complaints and reports against licensed care facilities, and the amount of people who are placed on a 72-hour holds against their will for going to the ER for treatment is crazy. And not treatment for related mental health problems, but physical illness that they wanted to be seen about. The last one I did, man, was in the psych ward for almost a week after initially going to the ER for shoulder pain. Story 110. Being disabled massively fudges you over in life. I'm 20 with 2 medical conditions. I went to 2 schools. One was made specifically for people with a certain type of condition. The other was not and did not understand me and my needs. I've had about 5 jobs, which were mostly short volunteer opportunities which I was paid for. None of them are in the field I want to be in. I had to edit my resume to make sure future employers know that I am not job hopping. I've been to multiple programs that are designed for people with my primary condition to get help getting used to college and work life. I was denied from one of them due to my secondary condition. I was also almost denied access to an attraction at an amusement park because of my primary condition. I went on attractions that are likely more dangerous than what I was trying to do. I am currently on SSI, which causes its own problems as they want to lower my check as fast as they can, despite me having a permanent condition which has no cure. I also have to be careful with what I eat and do because of my secondary condition, since emergency services cannot administer my emergency medication in my area. I also cannot drive and need to use public transportation to go anywhere without a family member. On top of that, some people are too busy on their phones to realize that I am about to cross, or that I'm waiting to cross. FYI, waving at someone with a white and red stick, proper name is cane, does not do anything as we usually cannot see you waving. LOL, this is longer than I thought. I know that there are worse things in the world, but this is what primarily affects me. Answer: it's because the dominant narrative around the disabled in American media and fiction presents two archetypes above all others: the strong hero and the invalid. The first is common in kids' media especially, and it's someone with a disability, but the focus is always on how they're so strong and can overcome their issues to be a normal kid just like you. The goal of this is generally to focus on acceptance of disability, which is a good thing, but it also has a side effect of putting the idea that all disabled people could be normal if they just worked hard enough. The second, which is common in media for adults, might as well be a prop or an object instead of a real person. It's someone so disabled that they can't interact with the normal world in any real way, and so the focus is instead usually placed on the non-disabled people in the story and how brave they are for caring for this person. And that means that a lot of people don't see disability for what it is, which is something that constantly and forever holds you back and adds a massive amount of work to your day-to-day life, often equivalent to working an unpaid job. Story 111. The strange creature with pitch black eyes and leathery wings at the end of my bed when I turn off the light. Story 112. Mental health crisis. I'm going through something big right now, and while many are supportive, there is not enough understanding out there. Even my therapist can't see that I'm drowning. Story 113. In the United States, the single most accurate predictor of future success is the zip code into which you were born. Story 114. The U.S. once ran lethal medical experiments on poor black people, eliminate them with syphilis, and never cured them when they had the chance. Google Tuskegee experiment. Your government will eliminate you if they want. They will torture you. They don't care about you. You are nothing to them, nothing except a cash cow. Story 115. Trump lost the lost election fair and square, orchestrated an insurrection, and now lies about it all the time. Story 116. Opportunity. When in the depths of financial despair, many people convince themselves, others, that there is nothing that can be done. Wrong. Opportunity is always waiting to be acted upon, whether it's in the form of one's own ideas or seeking out opportunities created by others. Story 117. Measles is highly contagious and eliminates and maims children and adults. Transmission and serious health effects are easily mitigated by immunization. Measles was previously eradicated in the U.S., but is creeping back due to vaccine hesitancy. Story 118. The globe being round, not flat, the moon landing actually happened, and if you think otherwise, you're actually moronic. The Republicans are actually becoming faciates, and this isn't even an insult or anything. Just sit down and look at their actions, compare them to the Nazi Party of Germany, pre-World War II, and tell me they're not in the very early phases of fascism. The Republicans, trans and black people, are the Nazis' Jews. Story 119. Controversial one. When it comes to dogs, breeding matters. I have 2 rescue mutts. I love them more than anything else, and I'd never change it for the world. However, I have also worked with purebred dogs, training and pet sitting, and certain breeds are just so much less prone to behavioral issues. Again, I love my dogs, but certain breeds are definitely better for certain circumstances. Answer: not just breeding, but good breeding. You can just throw any 2 dogs of the same breed together and expect good results. If you don't pay attention to temperaments and possible health issues, things can end up very bad. I think that has to do a lot with the current bully breed crisis. Poor breeding leads to all kinds of issues, and pit bulls especially are being irresponsibly bred like crazy. In my area, it's starting to happen with shepherds too. Story 120. Chronic illness that are still misunderstood like ME/CFS. You want to talk about being absolutely gaslit and mocked by everyone from doctors to your closest family members. Holy hell, I have never felt so shoot as to when I first started figuring out this illness. Story 121. How damaging adult content can be and how it can affect relationships and set unrealistic standards onto people. Story 122. January 6th, Insurrection Day. We all saw what happened from multiple camera angles, live and on replay. Stop denying there was an attempt at overtaking our government, because that is exactly what happened that day. Story 123. That most industries, agencies, and systems are captured, either by the govt, e.g. China, or by those who bought the govt, e.g. U.S. There's so much corruption that those involved who give F have already left or been kicked out, or they quietly ignore it because they cannot afford the selflessness required. Just because they had a solid reputation in the beginning doesn't negate there's nothing preventing them from ruining it. You don't always have to dig deep to find signs of decay either. Some outright brag. Story 124. That allergies can randomly form out of nowhere, or that randomly, if your immune system senses your eyes exist, it'll attack it and make you go blind. You can be perfectly healthy, but then your immune system says, no. Story 125. Macroeconomic things like inflation. Just say it didn't inflate, then all our money problems will go away. These are real observations made by experts, not some made-up number to make it life more expensive. And people not believing in the economic system actually contributes to negative economic outcomes, like higher inflation. Story 126. There is a disturbing anti-science trend in general these days, most notably with opposing vaccines and denying climate change. Edit, I have angered the anti-vaxxers. They have come to preach the word of Nurgle to me. Answer, it's the paradox of the success of public health. We have created societies where it is comparably easy for people to not die. As a result, many people take those successes for granted and simultaneously develop luxury beliefs that are transparently wrong and stupid and collectively destructive if, for instance, they bring us below herd immunity thresholds. But that don't cost the individual very much personally. Story 127. Men's issues, especially if a woman is in the room, lol. But for real though, if someone tries to talk about a problem that men face, you always have that woman trying to downplay or dismiss it as a real problem and trying to hijack the conversation to turn it into a woman's issue, without fail. Once you notice it happening over and over again, it actually becomes quite comical. Story 128. I don't have time to work out or exercise. Absolutely anyone can take 30 minutes out of their day and walk run for free. Story 129. We don't currently have nearly any options for healthy in-person communities. We're the first generation to be able to fully opt out of any social discomfort, and it's completely ducked our communities. And we now think the only people who can socialize are people who are fearless, who never are embarrassed and never make mistakes. It's only for beautiful, top percent kind of people. We've lost the option for the one to only be an idea in air. Before tech, you couldn't see the inner life of a millionaire. You couldn't stay home fully for months. You couldn't hear about 500 different people's accomplishments before 21 years old in a single day. For most of history, you only had your own lives experienced as fact. If you didn't see it, there was no proof. It was verbal stories, written stories, and handmade visual stories. It's not just boomer ideas that tech has really distorted personhood and ruined normal, fulfilling, thriving non-romantic relationships. Story 130. Fabric softener and dryer sheets are completely unnecessary and a waste of money. I want my clothes the regular stiffness. Story 131. That the USA government is capable of attacking its own people to have a reason to attack another country. If you want more info, look for Operation Northwoods. Story 132. Nobody is as subtle as they think they are. You think you're hiding that bitter tone in your voice? You're not. People notice. You think your passive aggressiveness comes off as a lighthearted joke? It doesn't. People notice. Story 133. Being depressed. The last thing you want to do when you're depressed is admit to it and enter into a quasi-argument about why it's happening. That takes emotional resources, and you're barely getting by as it is. There's a frustration among your friends and colleagues, at least in American culture, with the inability to fix your problem that breeds resentment. Being tired is a good excuse to sidestep that whole issue, at least for the day. Story 134. Women like muscles, not meatheads or guys on steroids. I mean the guys who go to gym regularly and eat enough protein to have muscle mass. Story 135. That two planes hijacked by Islamic extremists crashed into the two largest business administrations in the U.S. for a terroristic demonstration. And that's it. Give it a rest. Dale Gribble. Story 136. The negative effects of adult beverage, not on the individual, but on the societal level. Just look up fetal adult beverage spectrum disorder. Think of traits you don't like in people and go compare. Story 137. Video game addiction. My wife works as a school psychologist. The amount of teenage boys who basically spend the vast majority of their free time playing video games is insane. It's increased massively since the 2000s when she started, and it was already bad then. Almost always these kids end up stunted emotionally, physically, and socially. It is arguably the single biggest thing bringing young boys down in the modern era. It's one of the most impactful modern addictions out there, and yet anytime it is brought up, there are hordes of people who want to deny it or downplay it. Story 138. Artificial intelligence is already loose on the internet and asking questions to learn more from actual humans. Story 139. That whether or not vaccines are poison, we save exponentially more lives by using them than by not using them. Story 140. There are far worse fates than passing in this world. Just because something didn't eliminate you doesn't mean you're better off now than if it had. Story 141. Joe Rogan is the mainstream news. He gets twice as many views than Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and CNN combined. He gets 10 times what CNN gets on average per episode. 11 million versus 822. Story 142. We are also running out antibiotics, and this is going to be bad news. Penicillin or variations of the psyllin family are used to treat infections. However, more and more bacteria are becoming resistant to the stuff, which is bad news if you are susceptible to infections. 2. Humanity is bipolar as hell. The French Revolution is a good example. Sometimes we can be nice and friendly. Other times we will willingly commit war crimes, atrocities, genocides to our own kind. 3. A baby doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. It's a taught thing and changes in different societies. 4. There's a new variant of COVID in India spreading as we speak. Story 143. You love liars. You pay to be lied to. People make millions of dollars and become famous simply because they are good liars. I'm talking about actors, etc. I know some of y'all on the special juice. Also, special juice existing. Story 144. The American Overton window has been yanked hard to the right since Eisenhower. Most don't like acknowledging it or recognizing what actually determines political ideology, and it's because we've accepted that our ideologies are broken between the two parties, while usually letting Republicans control the narrative, that has resulted in our realities being warped. Story 145. There isn't always a good thing that comes from a bad thing. Sometimes things just suck. The universe doesn't care about your misery, and not every adversity makes you stronger. Story 146. That a simple act of kindness, i.e., smiling at someone or holding the door open, really can and does make a huge impact on someone's mental health that day. Story 147. Don't look down on those in the disability community. One literal misstep, and you too could be in need of a walking aid, a guide dog, or a 247 full-time carer and support to do everything for you. TBIs don't discriminate. Not everyone in a wheelchair is intellectually disabled, and not being verbal doesn't mean non-communicating. Story 148. Alexa or Google or something is listening and tracking us. I keep telling my husband this is true, it can't be a coincidence, but he won't believe me. For example, I was just mindlessly talking about Matt McConaughey to my husband one night. Then poof, the next day on my YouTube feed, Interstellar shows up. I have never watched anything from Matt McConaughey on YouTube in my life. I have so many instances of this happening, it can't be coincidence. Answer. I once worked at a store that sold a lot of wacky clothes, and one day I was mocking this shipment of ugly jackets that came emblazoned with a hip version of the cartoon Pink Panther. On my desktop computer at my house when I got home from work, nearly all my YouTube suggestions were related to the Pink Panther franchise. And this happens a ton. This was just a particularly egregious example. Story 149. We're not at the worst point in history things have ever been. We're simply more informed about how rotten things are than we have ever been before. Story 150. If someone cheats, the person who got with that person knowing they were in a relationship is almost as bad as the cheater. Story 151. Drive-through tunnel car washes with the spinning brushes, known in the industry as friction tunnel or friction in bay automatics, are one of the worst, least optimal ways to clean a car, often causing significant damage to the paintwork due to the abrasive nature of the process. Story 152. Americans already pool money for healthcare. They just do it through a wholly unnecessary, greedy middleman that grossly jacks up the price and denies care. Answer. What I find disturbingly amusing with the U.S. healthcare is that so many people are against universal healthcare. Yet when some tragedy happens, the first thing they're doing is setting up a GoFundMe page, asking for money from others to pay medical bills. Meaning that's universal healthcare. It's just unorganized. I think in the U.S., that's the #1 type of post on GoFundMe is for medical bill payment. Story 153. The fact that there are people who are hungry and homeless just a few miles away from most of us. And if you live in the city, probably less than a mile away from you. When many people see homeless people on the streets, they look away and pretend they don't even exist. It's become habit to us, and it's very sad. Just because we look away doesn't mean they aren't there. Story 154. That society and the world as we know it is held together by duct tape made of money. If the U.S. ever defaulted on its debt, I feel like it would begin a domino effect of apocalyptic proportions. Story 155. A lot of people think mental illness isn't real and can be cured by God or something, but someone eliminate themselves by jumping in front of a train is not something my friend would do when they felt well mentally, and there was not something biologically off for her. I miss her. Story 156. You need to actually poison your own data pool by aggregating a honeypot spam email account with a bunch of known false information in it into your public-facing profiles. Story 157. Going through 9 months of an uneventful pregnancy only to find out their heartbeat stopped out of nowhere. You're not always guaranteed to have a healthy baby. Story 158. We are not the main character. Everyone has similar shit going on. Everyone has their own challenges and don't even know you exist. The world doesn't revolve around you. You're a tiny blip in existence. Story 159. Getting angry with other drivers when roads are crowded and you complain about all the traffic. You are the traffic. Story 160. Not by everyone, but an increasing number of people believe the earth is flat and is very concerning. Story 161. Post-viral illness, specifically long COVID, was a healthy 29-year-old and have been living with an annoying post-viral syndrome for the last 3 years from a confirmed mild infection. Research has been starting to find the cause, and people are starting to be cured from monoclonal antibodies. Makes you think what other pathogens may have changed someone's life. Story 162. Being lonely can be a silent killer, especially when you have mental health issues. People who you have loved and cherished for years won't understand you or care about you. You just have to make peace with it. Story 163. Passing's a comin', slow and steady or quick and sudden, but one way or another it lands at our doorstep. Most of us live as if we're above it or it won't happen to us. Answer? Yep, I used my teeth to peel the remaining amount of mango flesh off a peel once. Turned out mango peel has the same allergen as poison oak, and I had just squirted a hearty dose of it right around my windpipe. Started choking, throat started closing up, and I'm like, well, here comes that old lonesome train to take me away. All over a bit of mango. I recovered shortly, but darn, felt pretty close. Story 164. No matter how in love you are, you're very likely to get your heart trampled on by that person. Doesn't matter how hard you fight for the relationship or how good of a partner you are. People can and will fall out of love with you for no reason at all, and you'll be left to deal with it and pick the pieces up all on your own. People don't actually give a shoot about you or your problems. 99 of the time, there is no one for you out there but you. Story 165. In the vast majority of cases, being overweight is a choice, or rather a decision, to prioritize some things over others. Story 166. A local guy won $10 million on a scratch-off at a gas station. A year later, he won another $10 million at the same gas station. I read the odds of this are in the trillions. Story 167. The effects of advertising. We all think we dislike ads, and they don't affect us personally, only other people. Marketing actually works best when people think it's doing nothing at all. Story 168. Just because you are a blood relative does not mean I have to love you. On the flip side, just because you're not a blood relative doesn't mean you can't be family. Story 169. COVID symptoms. I never had heart issues before. Now I have a heart monitor implant. Got COVID before the vax. It messed my ticker up. Story 170. How Douyin is regulated in China, but TikTok is not in America. And they know how damaging it can be, so they do it while feeding misinformation into the algorithms to spread falsities and rile our U.S. citizens. Story 171. Well, I read mostly all science journals, so anytime I try to tell people things, they call me stupid and don't believe me. So the answer is the stuff I say to people that they refuse to believe. Story 172. Everyone, including those who think they are morally consistent, is a hypocrite. Everyone is a product of custom and habit. Story 173. There really is a media conspiracy to keep you and me and everyone afraid and confused, so we buy more cheap junk and eat less healthy foods, and I can prove it easily. Cut the cord entirely for 6 months. No media intake at all, not even the newspaper. Just a bunch of DVD, movie STV shows, music, MP3s, and books with words, not voices, to pass the time and go live your life with just an old-school, dumb phone to communicate with. Assess your mental health and general happiness after 6 months. 90 chance it's significantly better. Also, 80-90 chance you won't really have missed anything in that time. If that's not proof of the conspiracy IDK, what is? Thing is, though, it's Hydra. not stark tech. I mean, there is no single evil mastermind, not even an organized group, really. Certainly no real cohesive message from them all, or we'd have been totally screwed 50 years ago. Instead, there's 20 million different media outlets, heads, each with their own agenda and message and ATM. This is the only real saving grace at all to the internet. It gives just enough of a voice to everyone that the mainstream media can't quite stamp out all the dissent, because if they could, they certainly would. Story 174. Mentality and your physiology play a huge role in determining your emotions and growth. Therefore, taking take of your body and mind should be important. Story 175. Men are in bad shape and have little recourse today, leaving space for the absolute worst actors to fill these gaps. Story 176. Everything everyone has ever and will ever do is done for a reason. There is no person did thing for absolutely no reason. You may not understand their logic, or their logic may be faulty, but they have a reason for doing it. Even young children, tipsy people, or people with severe mental illnesses have a reason for what they do, even if they can't articulate it or even understand it themselves. Also, quite often, when someone insists someone did something for no reason, there is a darn good reason that they are aware of to some degree. E.g., that bouncer threw me out of the bar for no reason. Then when telling you about what happened, they'll casually mention, all I did was flirt with the bar staff, when they actually tried groping them. Working around bars, you hear this all the time. You'll see someone harassing people then, when confronted, it's suddenly for no reason, and they're the victim. Story 177. That you are not better than someone who is religious because you're an atheist, and you are not better than an atheist if you are religious. As someone who was an atheist and now Christian, both groups of people are fudge annoying. Story 178. We're in a fudge recession. Just because companies are making profits doesn't mean the consumer economy isn't literally on fire. Corporate profits do not equal consumer profits. Story 179. COVID is still very real and still very serious, and nobody gives a fudge or takes any precautions at all. Story 180. This is more from those are able-bodied without neurological issues, mental illnesses. Your health isn't guaranteed. Story 181. That no medical intervention is 100% for everyone. True informed consent should and is required by law be done first, regardless of how you feel about the intervention. If it's not, it's now medical battery, regardless of if it's in the patient's best interest. Story 182. We're pack animals and will never have the compassion needed for societies to work without eventually collapsing. One big family is an unrealistic expectation for humans. Story 183. That they are a hypocrite. Fact is, every human being is a hypocrite in some way, shape, or form. Few quick examples. People will always say that they are against child labor, yet I guarantee they will have many items of clothing that is made by child labor. People will say that it is disgraceful how employers like Amazon treat their employees, but will often buy items from Amazon. We all are hypocrites on some level. Story 184. They actually do put stuff in the water that makes the frogs gay. Okay, technically it's not making them gay, it's making them hermaphrodites. It's a pesticide called atrazine. Story 185. The silent majority. When the COVID-19 pandemic was starting out, there was a lot of anti-vaccine noise online. My sister was very concerned that people in Canada, where we live, would not get vaccinated beyond the 60 threshold. I laughed and told her we would definitely get beyond that, most likely 80, which we did. I told her the silent majority isn't going to go online and argue with people who are never going to accept the reality of science. They're simply going to keep their opinions to themselves and go about their business after getting vaccinated, and such was the case. Story 186. Social circle that you surround yourself with has actually impact on how you turn out to be in your life. Sometimes as an individual, you can't have 100% control over yourself. You do get affected by people around you. You start thinking like them, behaving like them, and make decisions that are common in that circle. Story 187. Fat people have always existed in every time period, in every culture, everywhere. There are naturally fat people, just as there are naturally thin people. Story 188. People ignore their blessings and focus on their misfortune. If you live in a modern industrial country, USA, Western Europe, etc., and are in good health, you are a lucky person. If you additionally have a happy family relationship, you are probably one of the luckiest people ever born. Also, people tend to attribute their success to hard work and talent rather than luck, and do the opposite for their failures. I'm unsure if this is denied by everyone, but by many. Story 189. Outside of natural events, things usually only happen or are allowed to happen because they benefit wealthy or powerful people. Also, most really big things that happen are outside of humanity's control. Story 190. Most of the products first world consumers use are the result of unfair wages, slavery, unsafe business practices, extortion, harmful behavior, or some other human rights issue. Clothing, cars, phones, foods. Most of it can trace origins back to something that most people would openly condemn if it was happening in their neighborhood. Story 191. Though frowned upon, it's okay to call your toddler a jerk. Can't believe I have to put this. No, people, I'm not actually telling my kid they're a jerk. Answer, I once yelled at my 4-year-old cousin, "What the fudge do you think you're doing? You fudge dildo?" Because he was about to put a screwdriver in the socket and my teenage self freaked out. A couple weeks later, he got in trouble at school for yelling at another kid. Fudge doing, you fudge dildo. He got the spirit of the message. No regrets. Would do it again. Story 192. White people face racism from non-white people quite often. Cue the semantic arguments everyone learned about in college about how white people can't face racism because their college professor said so. Story 193. Shoot doesn't have to make you angry. It can take a long time to work on, but you really can just change your mind about how things affect you. Story 194. Cops aren't bastards for giving you a speeding fine. You were doing something wrong and you got caught. Suck it up. They do other bastard things, but speeding tickets for speeding is not one of them. Story 195. It was proven, not a weird conspiracy theory or medical quackery, that the sugar industry funded trash studies about heart disease to point at fat and away from sugar. Fatty foods are not bad for you, nor do they make you fat. High blood sugar increases strain on your arteries, which causes high cholesterol. Body fat is converted from excess glucose by the liver. Story 196. Santa Claus. Everyone denies his existence, but I saw him with my own 2 eyes. Saw him kissing my mum too, the rat bastard. I'll unveil your identity one day, Claus. Mark my words. Story 197. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? You are not only good, and that's okay. Story 198. The reality of intimacy attraction. It either exists or not, and no amount of yapping, ranting, or wishful thinking changes it because it's a spontaneous feeling. Story 199. It really is up to you to make changes. Yes, your environment, background, and relationships can potentially be limiting. However, at the end of the day, it is truly on you and no one else to decide how your life will play out. Edit, privilege plays a big part in what is available in regard to this too. Please do not think I am denying that. What I am saying is the choices that we have within each given circumstance decide what will follow. Story 200. Not everyone denies this, but we don't know the long-term effects of multiple COVID infections, so it shouldn't be written off as mild. Answer, I have bronchiectasis from a lung infection. 14 years ago, and ever since I got COVID back to back in a 9-month period, I've developed that same lung infection again. COVID is a strange beast, trying to fight it off, but NTM is pretty gnarly. Luckily, I'm still fairly young for this, so I should be able to hold it down for the 18-month antibiotic marathon I'm about to go on. Story 201. All current legislation that's popular in the media right now is about controlling poor people, not protecting the public. Guns, substances, prostitution, abortions, adult content, etc. They are all legally accessible if you have enough money. It's about keeping poor people poor and under control. Story 202. Democrats are further left than most labor parties in Europe as soon as you step outside of economics. The obsession with labeling left and right solely based on economic policy is a large part of the reason we're socially backsliding, not just in the US, but in many Western European countries as well. We stopped acknowledging the importance of the other aspects of politics, and so they became an afterthought. Story 203. Teachers have a favorite student, just like parents have a favorite child. Also, teachers actually expect more from the favorite student, not less. If we see that you can perform the monologue, build the diorama to perfection, or write that essay brilliantly, we expect nothing less. It's unfair, but true. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.